Gen AI, agentic AI is going to transform how every company, every industry works. It's just to get there is going to take a little longer.
How are you infusing this AI first thinking in your organization?
This is a journey. You're always going to be learning. Technology is always going to change.
Welcome to CIO Ventures CXO Insights on AI, where we hear from top technology executives at leading Fortune 2000 companies. My name is Mark Fernandez, and I'm a managing partner here. Our guest today is Dave Williams, Chief Information and Digital Officer of Merck. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Good to see you.
So, Dave, where are you in your AI journey? Could you give us some examples of how AI is helping you and maybe some places where it has not worked?
Mark, we're done. We just finished the AI journey. We've checked every box. Everything is working perfectly.
That's what I want to hear.
No, I would say we're where most companies are, Mark. We've had some really strong pockets of success, and I can give a couple examples on that. But we are really focused on how do we scale this up, all right, and how do we become an AI native company. And we have a long way to go, like most companies, but we are seeing some areas where the value is significant. Maybe I'll just highlight two to make it real, Mark. One is, in the core of our business, which is discovering and developing new medicines, right? In drug discovery, for several years, we've been focused on accelerating the process of identifying new targets in the body and building new composition of matter and new medicines through the marriage of wet lab, which is doing traditional experiments in the lab, and in silico. So if you think of that as a bit of a flywheel, marrying up the wet lab and in silico enabled by AI is something our scientists have been doing for many, many years. And in the past several years, we've seen that accelerate with the newest technologies and advances in processing power, et cetera. We had one recent graduate that we got to clinical a full year earlier than we would have in the past. And the reason that's important is, the quicker we can get things through into clinical and out of clinical trials and into manufacturing, the quicker our patients get these new medicines. So that's where we're really starting to see significant value. Another example I can give, if I move to maybe the commercial side of our business, when we get an approval to get access in new markets for patients, we have to go through a lot of process. But one of the processes is called an HTA, or it's a health technology assessment. And this is a process we go through in each market. It's kind of different for each market to demonstrate the value of whatever that medicine is. These are hundreds of pages. They're heavily technical, a lot of research. And that's one process we've just recently transformed through generative AI and literally cut the time and the cost to do that in half. And we're actually submitting live dossiers using that new capability in markets. So this isn't something that we're just piloting. This is something that's being used in 3 or 4 markets, and we're looking to scale it, across the globe. So, and if you think of that second example, it's all about data, right? And using these capabilities to shorten that cycle with a human in the loop. We see a ton of those opportunities across the enterprise. So those are just 2 examples of where we're actually making it real and those pockets of success.
25 years of being in venture capital, never seen things move this fast, Dave. Do we think, though, we're setting the right expectations for AI's impact within large enterprises, both in the near and the medium term?
No. I think in the near, especially in the near term, it's the typical hype cycle you see with technology. And a lot of the stuff in the press right now is, well, where's the return? We were expecting to see the return by this point. And I think the reality is it's just harder, Mark, than people appreciate. And I think, the way I like to say is there's probably 3 main reasons for that in large enterprises. Now, I will say before I even get to that, over the medium and long term, the value is absolutely going to be there, right? There's been technologies in the past where, you look at it and you're like, yeah, I'm not quite sure that's actually going to make a difference long term. I have zero doubt, like Gen AI, agentic AI is going to transform how every company, every industry works. It's just to get there is going to take a little longer. And for me, there's 3 reasons. One, when you go into any big enterprise or even medium-sized enterprise, the current enterprise processes and data structures are not fully connected, they're not contextualized, and they're not AI ready. And so a lot of the data to drive, a truly agentic organization is trapped in silos, and there's just a lot of work that has to be done on the foundation. The second is I call it the run and transform challenge. We're asking our employees, you know, to make sure you run the business every day, flawlessly. Like we have to deliver what we need to deliver. Um, we ask them to stay current with technology that's changing faster than it's ever changed. And oh, yeah, by the way, we also need you to rethink how you work. So make sure you deliver every day, try and stay current on the technologies and change everything like to the new way of working. That's a tall task and it's overwhelming and it's intimidating and people just don't have the headspace for it. And then the third, this ties into the venture capital world. I think it's very easy to fall into oh, there's a new tool that's going to solve all this for me, right? A new startup or a new company. And the reality is transformation in the enterprise is a heavy lift.
Technology, data, organization. What's been the hardest part of this? Is it just, I'm sure it's a combination of all, but where have you found the most friction?
It is a combination, but by far it's the organizational change. As I just mentioned, that our colleagues are asked to do a lot, deliver, stay current, and transform. And there's no piece of software that's going to tackle that for them. It requires us to invest heavily in relationships. It requires us digital professionals to understand those domains. And the one thing we talk about a lot is if we can increase our investment in just upskilling all of our knowledge workers to better integrate these tools, just basic tools, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, whichever tool or tools you're using, into your daily work and drive a 5, 10, 15% productivity, which I think is very easy. That's time you can reinvest into taking a step back and rethinking the areas of the process. But it's just hard. I mean, by far, the organizational piece and the change management is the harder part. I'd say the next hardest and related to that is the process reengineering and the data. And which technology choices we make is actually probably the easiest part of it.
So if you were starting from scratch today, knowing what you know, Dave, what part of the technology stack would you redesign first because of AI?
I don't know if it's a part of the stack as much as I would say a data and process first focus on this. Merck's a roughly 140-year-old company. We have a lot of legacy processes, technology, and back in the day, departments would design for their needs, and more, a lot of the values in the seams. So, as an example, in between early discovery research and clinical development, and then from clinical development to manufacturing. Molecules travel from early discovery all the way across that, but a lot of our systems and process were designed to optimize one piece of it. So I feel like if you could go back, you would invest a lot more to help people understand that if we could think of this as the enterprise process and the enterprise's data versus my department's process and my department's data, that would unlock a lot of value. But again, that's a massive mindset shift.
As you think about the models, Dave, and they're getting bigger and faster and stronger, um, you mentioned drug discovery, some of the key processes, the key IP that Merck and pharma companies have. How do you think about build versus buy versus partner in AI here?
Yeah, historically, we've been a buy first, and then the build was really reserved for things where we thought we were really going to get a differentiated advantage. And so, as an example, in the last several years, a lot of these tools I mentioned in early discovery, these are some internal tools that we've built in partnership with our scientists that have significantly improved productivity in the labs. And we did that because number one, there wasn't anything you could buy off the shelf. And that is, we view it as core and a differentiator for us. I know there's a lot of momentum now with the generative AI and these coding tools for people to look at, can I be developing my own in-house fill in the blank? And all the talk about the SaaS apocalypse, which I personally believe is overrated. Like I don't, in my seat, I don't have any desire to vibe code my ERP or my CRM. Um, these companies have put a ton of effort into putting the right scaffolding in place to support compliance and enterprise process. So I could see there's certain things that you may look differently at developing in-house now with these tools than you would have in the past. But at least from one CIO, I don't have a strategy that says I'm going to dramatically pivot from buying to building in-house. And a big part of that is I realize whatever I build, I have to support and sustain and connect. And I'm not a software company. That's not our core. I'd rather put our intellectual capital towards helping to drive adoption in our core business and helping our business users with some of the things that we talked about before.
So Dave, given them in venture capital, right? What advice would you give startups right now? And I know you work with a lot of startups, and you've been one of the forward thinkers on this. So it is an interesting time for startups and for founders. So what advice would you give them?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. A couple things. One, um, be very clear on my problems that you're focused on solving and how you're going to do that. Um, it's unfortunate. Probably at least half the time I'm sitting with a startup, I'm really having to work hard to connect what they're talking about to a need I have. And I would say right away, know your audience, know the pain points, and start there because now you've got my attention, right? Like if you're going to talk about a known pain point in pharma, um, and that's what you're starting your company on, like you got my attention, and then I'm going to be listening to, okay, well, how are you going to do that? So that's one I would say. The second is take time to really understand what it takes to drive adoption in a company from my seat. Um, and what I mean by that is, for the technology that you're building or bringing to market, does it integrate with my current ecosystem? Um, is it something that I'd be willing to take a risk on a startup? And you and I were talking about one company a couple of weeks ago that it was very easy for me to partner with this company because what the need they were servicing, which was accelerating migrations of SAP from ECC to S4. It was it was a project. I didn't have to worry about, is this going to be a critical part of my infrastructure if the company didn't work out or if somebody bought them that was not favorable to us. So that's part of our decision calculus too. Like, can I take a chance on this company? Um, and then the last thing I would say is help us simplify. The other question that I ask, and just about every CIO asks when they sit with a startup is, are you taking something out of my environment or are you just adding to it? Because if you are going to come in and show me a product that's going to help me simplify and reduce my cost and allow me to go faster, I'm going to listen. If you tell me that it's something that incrementally helps my ecosystem, but is adding on to it, and I'm going to have to integrate it, and it's going to increase my cost, it's less attractive. So anything you can do to simplify. So if I summarize all that, know my problems, have a solution for it, be practical and pragmatic on what it's going to take to get to value, and then help me simplify.
Maybe one last question, Dave, in terms of how are you infusing this AI first thinking in your organization, right? And I want to tie this into also what advice would you give, college graduates as they're going through this? So, how are you infusing it? Some of the folks who are graduating now are AI native. How do you think about kind of finding that balance in your organization?
Yeah. So maybe I'll answer it from two lens, Mark. One is my organization in IT, but then I'm going to talk about it more across the broader, the entire company. Maybe I'll start with the latter because we started a program probably 4 or 5 years ago called Digital U. And it started a conversation I was having with our CEO where I said, I could provide the best digital backbone. I could provide the best talent. If our employees across the company are uncomfortable with digital or they're not digitally savvy, the adoption is going to be harder and harder and harder. So we started Digital U to upskill the entire company. And we had courses on cyber and analytics and just data in general. And that platform today, we were then able to leverage when Gen AI came out. So we had a lot of boot camps and a lot of courses on Gen AI, and that's been really helpful to upskill the entire organization. For my team, we do the same thing, but on steroids. I always tell my team, and this is hard. You have to stay current, because if even a year ago, how you would solve for a problem, if you had the same problem come up today, you would solve for it in a very different way. So we have to have an architecture that's agile and flexible, but we have to have employees too that have a growth mindset and are willing to learn and constantly adapt, but not adapt to a standpoint where you just focus on the technology and forget that you have to actually drive business outcomes too. So for people entering the workforce, I would honestly say a similar thing, which is, you know, just know that you have, this is a journey. You're always going to be learning. Technology is always going to change. The skill set that the portable skill set is your ability to build relationships, your ability to communicate, your ability to collaborate across different areas on solution. Like, regardless of the technology, those softer skills are really important, and they're going to travel with you to any industry and any job. So I would always invest in those. That's a no regrets move.
Very, very insightful, and I think helpful for entrepreneurs, for fresh grads, for your employees, and for your peers. So much appreciated. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Mark. Good to see you.